A man reveals himself long before he ever realizes it. Not through his clothes. Not through his money. Not even through his achievements. He reveals himself through his words. Every sentence he repeats, every excuse he leans on, every phrase he throws out without thinking quietly exposes his inner condition. Most men never notice this. They spend their lives trying to look strong while speaking like someone who has already surrendered. The Stoics understood this clearly. They believed that speech is never accidental. Words are habits of thought spoken out loud. And habits, repeated long enough, become character. If you want to know where a man is headed in life, listen to what he says when things do not go his way. Listen to how he explains failure. Listen to what comes out of his mouth when effort is required. That is where the truth lives. Today, we are going to examine 5 things a stupid man always says. Not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. Because stupidity, in the Stoic sense, is not a lack of intelligence. It is a lack of discipline. These phrases are not harmless. They shape how a man sees himself, how others see him, and how his life unfolds over time. If you recognize any of them in yourself, that awareness is not shameful. It is the starting point of strength. What you will gain from listening carefully is simple but demanding. You will learn to hear your own language more clearly. You will begin to notice how certain words weaken your resolve before action even begins. And you will understand why disciplined men guard their speech as carefully as their time. This is not about judging others. It is about responsibility. Growth always requires effort, and effort begins with honesty. The Stoics believe that a man's inner world determines his outer results. Thought shapes action, action shapes habit, and habit shapes character. Language sits right in the middle of this chain. When a man speaks, he is not just communicating with others. He is reinforcing a pattern inside himself. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person's soul takes on the color of his thoughts. Speech is simply thought made audible. When language becomes careless, the mind follows. When language becomes disciplined, the mind sharpens. This is why the Stoics paid close attention to what they said, even in private. They understood that no word is neutral. Every phrase either strengthens self-command or weakens it. Careless language has long-term consequences. A man who constantly speaks in excuses trains himself to avoid responsibility. A man who speaks in absolutes trains himself to give up early. Over time, these habits harden. What begins as a phrase becomes a mindset. What becomes a mindset eventually becomes a life. With that foundation in place, let us look closely at the phrases themselves. It's not my fault. This phrase is often spoken quickly, sometimes even automatically. On the surface, it sounds like self-defense. Beneath it lies avoidance. When a man says, "It's not my fault," he is trying to escape discomfort rather than confront reality. Psychologically, this phrase protects the ego. Admitting fault requires humility, and humility requires strength. Blame feels lighter because it shifts the burden outward. Fate, circumstances, other people, bad luck, these become convenient shelters. But every time a man uses this phrase, he gives away a piece of his agency. The Stoics rejected this way of thinking completely. Epictetus taught that while we do not control external events, we always control our responses. Responsibility, in the Stoic sense, does not mean self-hatred or constant guilt. It means ownership. A disciplined man asks what part of this situation belongs to him, even when the situation is unfair. The contrast here is clear. An undisciplined man uses blame to protect his comfort. A disciplined man uses responsibility to build his character. One stays stuck. The other grows stronger under pressure. In real life, this phrase quietly damages respect. People trust those who take ownership. They distance themselves from those who always explain why nothing was their doing. Over time, opportunities follow responsibility, not excuses. A man who removes this phrase from his language removes a major obstacle from his path. I already know that. At first glance, this phrase sounds confident. In reality, it signals stagnation. When a man says, I already know that, he is not stating knowledge. He is closing a door. Learning requires openness, and openness requires admitting that there is more to understand. Psychologically, this phrase often hides insecurity. It is easier to appear knowledgeable than to risk being seen as a student. But the cost is growth. The mind that believes it has arrived stops moving forward. The Stoics warned against this illusion. Epictetus made it clear that no one learns anything while defending an image of expertise. Wisdom begins with recognizing limits. Socrates, whom the Stoics admired deeply, built his entire philosophy on this principle. Awareness of ignorance is not weakness. It is the foundation of progress. The undisciplined man guards his pride. The disciplined man guards his capacity to learn. One chooses comfort. The other chooses expansion. In daily life, this phrase quietly separates men who improve from men who repeat the same mistakes for years. Skills stagnate. Relationships suffer. Opportunities are missed because listening stops too early. Removing this phrase reopens the path to growth. That's impossible. This phrase ends effort before it begins. It sounds rational, even realistic, but it often masks fear. Declaring something impossible relieves a man from the burden of trying. If it cannot be done, there is no need to endure discomfort, failure, or discipline. Psychologically, this phrase protects against disappointment. But it also guarantees limitation. Many things that feel impossible are simply unfamiliar or demanding. The mind labels them unreachable to avoid the cost of effort. The Stoics approached difficulty differently. Seneca argued that we do not fail because things are hard. Things are hard because we avoid them. Difficulty is not evidence of impossibility. It is evidence that growth is required. Here again, the contrast is sharp. An undisciplined man measures himself against comfort. A disciplined man measures himself against potential. One shrinks his world. The other expands it through effort. In practical terms, this phrase shapes a man's future more than he realizes. Careers stall. Health declines. Skills remain undeveloped. All because effort was dismissed too early. When this phrase leaves a man's vocabulary, curiosity replaces fear, and action replaces hesitation. I don't care. This phrase is often misunderstood. The Stoics did teach indifference, but not the kind most people practice. Stoic indifference meant freedom from obsession with things outside one's control. It did not mean apathy toward character, effort, or responsibility. When an undisciplined man says, I don't care, he is often withdrawing to avoid effort or vulnerability. It is a shield, not a principle. It signals disengagement rather than strength. Psychologically, this phrase numbs discomfort. Caring requires investment, and investment risks failure. By declaring indifference, a man protects himself from disappointment, but he also disconnects from meaning. The Stoic distinction is precise. A disciplined man does not care about praise, status, or outcomes beyond his control. But he cares deeply about his actions, his values, and his integrity. He chooses carefully where to invest his attention. In daily life, misuse of this phrase erodes trust and respect. People sense when indifference is an escape rather than a principle. Over time, opportunities bypass those who appear disengaged. Purpose requires care. Removing this phrase restores clarity about what truly matters. What's in it for me? This phrase reveals a transactional mindset. It reduces every decision to personal gain. While self-interest is natural, obsession with it shrinks perspective. Life becomes a series of calculations rather than a field of contribution. Psychologically, this phrase signals insecurity. A man who feels internally scarce is always measuring what he gets back. Generosity, in contrast, flows from strength. It assumes abundance rather than lack. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that what benefits the whole benefits the individual. The Stoics viewed humans as social beings. Character was not developed in isolation but through service, cooperation, and shared responsibility. The undisciplined man asks what he gains immediately. The disciplined man asks what kind of man he becomes through his actions. One chases short-term advantage. The other builds long-term respect and meaning. In real life, this phrase limits influence. People are drawn to those who contribute without constant calculation. Trust grows where generosity exists. Removing this phrase expands a man's impact far beyond immediate reward. When these phrases are examined together, a pattern emerges. Each one avoids responsibility in a different form. Blame avoids ownership. Certainty avoids learning. Impossibility avoids effort. Indifference avoids engagement. Transactional thinking avoids contribution. This is the turning point most men never reach. They recognize the phrases but refuse to confront what they cost. Avoidance feels easier in the moment. But over years, it compounds. Weak language creates weak habits. Weak habits create a small life. The Stoics were honest about this cost. They did not soften the truth to make it comfortable. They understood that freedom comes from discipline, not from excuses. A man either trains himself through effort or is trained by circumstances. Awareness is the beginning, not the end. Noticing these phrases is only useful if it leads to change. Discipline. E is built through repetition. Language changes when attention is applied consistently. A disciplined man listens to himself carefully. He notices when an excuse tries to surface. He pauses. He replaces it with ownership. This does not happen overnight. It happens through daily correction. Responsibility is not a burden imposed from outside. It is a tool chosen from within. Each time a man adjusts his language, he strengthens self-command. Over time, the internal shift becomes visible in behavior, decisions, and outcomes. There is no comfort here without accountability. Growth requires effort, and effort requires patience. But the reward is clarity. A man who disciplines his speech disciplines his life. Words are never just sounds. They are decisions repeated quietly. A stupid man exposes his weakness by speaking without thought. A disciplined man protects his strength by choosing his words carefully. Character is not declared. It is revealed. And language is one of its clearest signals. When a man takes responsibility for what he says, he takes responsibility for who he becomes. A Stoic once observed that a man does not rise by speaking more, but by speaking with intention. Choose your words carefully. They are shaping your future, whether you notice it or not.